I am so thrilled to film this episode of The Art of Dungeon Mastering that I can barely contain myself. Greetings and welcome back to another episode of the Vodkast Does Dungeons and Dragons, the art of dungeon mastering, whatever you want to call it. I don't really care. I'm here to talk about some Dungeons and Dragons today. More specifically, I'm here to talk about a very specific encounter that happened 2 weeks ago in a game that I ran. Normally on an episode of The Art of Dungeon Mastering, we would cover several topics in one episode. However, this episode is all going to be self-contained because the story, the item, and the thing I want to talk about today all is surrounded in this one game that I had 2 weeks ago. So let me start by explaining the scenario. My party currently find themselves in a casino in the Abyss called Hellscapes and High Stakes. And there, they were seeking out information that they needed to find out about the big bad guy in the game. Doesn't really matter. Nonetheless, there was word sent ahead of them. Some of the demons and devils somehow working together in this casino cornered them. They took out quite a few of them before they finally knew that they were outnumbered. And they were thrown into this thing called the Gauntlet. And so it's a series of tests that they have to perform to be able to get through. And if they can get through, normally you win a prize. In this case, they just get to live. And so they entered the Gauntlet. And the first room was, I don't know if you guys are familiar with it or not, but the haunted hallway is a trap in, I think it might just be the Dungeon Master's Guide. It might be Tasha's Cauldron of everything. I don't know which one it's in. But if you want to look it up, I'll try to put a link in the comments below. And so they were able to get through that. One of my players, Dave, was like a riddle genius. And every single riddle, all 6 in a row, he just nailed them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It was amazing. You'd have to be there. It was one of those moments in D&D that you'll always talk about. Be like, he was just crazy. He was on fire. They moved on to the second room, which was a giant cavernous room filled with Chasme and several other demons, as well as a venom troll that they could see, a very large venom troll, about 20 feet tall. Like I said, this is a very cavernous room with stacks of bodies in various states of decay, mostly bones down the bottom, even the dust of bones that have been sitting there for years and years. They tried to sneak into the room, but somehow the troll had seen them and used one of its abilities to jump behind them to initiate combat and alert the and the other demons that were in the room to swarm them. At that point, combat was on. So normally when you think of trolls, how many trolls have you fought in a D&D game before or thrown at your party before? You know that their weakness is fire and acid. Now, your player may not know that, or the character rather may not know that, but the player has that information, and it's hard to hold that back out of game. So what I like to do as a DM is give that monster a twist. Either give it some magical items, give it a cool feat. For example, this troll, I gave a suit of studded leather armor of acid protection and a ring of elemental control so that fire and acid would do nothing to them pretty much. They were very resistant, if not completely immune to it at that point. So as the party's throwing these fireballs and stuff at the venom troll, it's not taking the damage they're expecting it to take, and it drew out the combat, and it allowed those Chasme to kind of swarm them. And I can't remember the name of the other creature that I threw at them, but they were very low hit points, very low challenge rating demons that were just enough to just keep them occupied long enough that the 2 party members went down. Thankfully, they were able to save them at the end of combat. But this troll used these items to its advantage and was able to stay longer into the combat and do a lot more damage than it would have been able to do had it been a normal troll and they just burnt it immediately and hadn't been able to regenerate, every round. I also gave this troll an item that I created called the Belt of Mass Manipulation. What the Belt of Mass Manipulation allows you to do is increase your size by 3 times. So this thing may have only been a 7-foot tall troll to begin with, but it allowed him to do that. I love creating magical items. It's one of my favorite things to do. A few weeks ago, I believe, I'll share it here, I made an item called the Ring of Duplicity, and I started throwing it back and forth with one of my players, one of my friends, Artie, and he just came up with great ideas for it, and I want to share that with you at some point, but I'd like to do it with him. Maybe we'll do another D&D episode with the Vodkast and friends. But back to modifying monsters, that's not the only thing you can do. There are a lot of cool feats out there. I just wanted to give you 2 examples that I usually take with a lot of my characters is alert. You cannot be surprised if you have that feat, and as well as you gain a +5 to your initiative. I believe there's one other thing that you get by gaining that feat. But it's one of the most, like, if you're a dex-based character, if you're a rogue or a monk or something like that, and you take this, you're almost guaranteed to go first in combat every time, adding that +5. Plus, if you already have a +4 or +5 to your dexterity, your initiative's starting at 9 or 10. Other factors could, of course, factor into that and even increase that number, either primarily or later on down the line. So, yeah, that's a cool feat to grab. And the other one I think is really neat, more for a player than a monster, is toughness, or tough, rather, because it adds 2 hit points for every level that you have. And if you have a character that doesn't have a great constitution score, or you just want to pump up your hit points a little bit more, maybe you're the tank and you need those extra, 20, 30 hit points at level 8 or 9, then that's another great feat. But these are feats that, they're not exclusive to players. I highly recommend going through the feats, taking a look at them, seeing which ones stand out to you, write down a list, keep them on a side note. And then as you're creating your scenarios, your encounters in D&D, remember those feats and think, okay, this party, what the party's going to do. You know your party well enough. You know who's going to do what and when they're going to do it. Throw them off balance and change everything up. Everything that they know about these creatures, make it different, make it exciting. That's the best part about being a dungeon master, is you have the power to change whatever you want. The rules are nice, of course, you got to stick to some of them, but a lot of those are very easily bendable, if not breakable. And I love house ruling things, and to be able to just take a monster that everyone's familiar with and scare the hell out of it is just awesome, I think. And I think you're awesome, too. And I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Vodkast Does Dungeons and Dragons, the art of dungeon mastering. And if you are loving the content I'm creating as much as I love creating the content that you guys are watching, would you please consider liking, commenting, subscribing, sharing, and hitting that little bell icon, because it'll let you know every time I put out a new video. Don't forget to make somebody smile today and make yourself a better person tomorrow than you were today, tomorrow. Let's make the world spin a little bit happier and a little bit more dragon-y. Together, let's sing and dance in the sun and in the rain as one, my brothers and sisters. Live life to the fullest and love every moment of it, because you just never know when that last moment's going to come for you. However, don't you ever live in fear of that moment. Always live in love and never let your inner child die. Ooh-wee. Take care of yourselves, take care of one another, and take care of those around you who cannot take care of themselves, for they are the ones that need it the most. And if no one has told you today that they love you, the Vodcast loves you very much just the way you are. All right, guys, do no harm. I'm Geycen Oliveira. This is the Vodcast, and I'll catch you guys a little bit further on down the road to 50. Take care, my friends, and happy adventuring.
Don't go to sleep with a catch it in your pocket.